A quorum. It's Monday, February the 2nd. Mr. Weezar, Mrs. Gruhl, Mr. Smith, myself, Bernard Parks is chair, and Mr. Rosenthal is on his way. Go down through the agenda. We have 11 closed session items that we will take up first. Let me just ask from the committee, items 2 through 6 are all workers' comp cases. If we can take those on consent and then deal with the other more pressing issues. Anybody have any concerns on those? Okay. And then we'll come back and address regular items 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 through 18, and special 1 are all the same issue we'll take together. Ready? Good afternoon. We're going to reconvene the regular meeting of the Budget and Finance Committee. We have a full committee in session. We'd like to move item 11 on consent from the closed session. Next item.
Item number 12 on the regular agenda is continued consideration of various budget issues referred back to the Budget and Finance Committee. Item 12A is the Department of Recreation and Parks report relative to fiscal year 2008-9 budget impacts.
Let me just ask, on item 12D, do we have a report since our last committee meeting?
We do not have a CAO report on that item.
Okay, we have Rec and Park come up on 12A.
Hello, committee members. Regina Adams.
One thing before you get started, so that we have some clarity as to your report. Could you give us the intent of the report as it relates to your department looking at the needs, and if I understand it, that you're also giving us some indication with the current state of this year's budget, what are some of the things that you'd have to do to continue in this year to stay within budget?
Correct.
And then, but these things would then have to, a minimum, have to be carried over in next year's budget, depending on what those numbers come out to be. But this is basically giving us a preview of what you're recommending to get through June 30th.
Correct. Regina Adams, Executive Officer, Recreation and Parks. I also have with me here at the table our 2 Assistant General Managers for Operations East, which is Vicki Israel, and Operations West, Kevin Regan. What we presented to you, we gave you 3 attachments. And what this information was to show, of course, for the current fiscal year, we're facing some financial difficulties and hard times as everybody else is. And of course, we're going to start, the public is going to start seeing some changes in the services and programs that we provide and offer to them. And what we've been asked, of course, repeatedly is, what is going to be the impact? And so what we put together was information on 3 attachments that show that how we're changing, which we had mentioned to you before, about the concept of how we're going to be providing our services, but also how our department is going to be organized. One of the things in the attachments is to show our clustering concept. In the past, what we've been able to do is that we've had staff at each of our facilities, and so they would kind of run their own facilities. But what's happening now, of course, since we're not going to be able to have the full complement of staff that we've had in the past, and that will continue into the next fiscal year as resources are reduced further, we can no longer offer that type of concept and be organized that way. So what we're doing is we're trying to take our facilities and we've clustered them citywide. And that's what we presented to you in one of the attachments here, is to show how we would try to put together our facilities and try to look at the radius of, how far apart each of them are and so forth. And so we presented to you our draft of how we're going to be organizing the facilities throughout the city. And that's the ones that we refer to as the clusters. The next part of that, as far as the clustering, is for us to now identify and to figure out where we're going to go as far as what services and programs are going to be offered within each of the clusters. We've broken it down to you for our department. Right now we're organized into 4 major regions, and within each of those regions we have so many clusters. And so now we have to identify what are going to be the programs and services that are going to be offered there. In the past, we may have offered, such as for a basketball program at each of the parks. Well, maybe we may not be able to do that in the future, and so we may have to look within a cluster and see, out of a cluster, it may have 3 or 4 facilities, and we have to identify which of the facilities might be the best place that maybe we will offer the basketball program instead of at each of our facilities as we've done in the past. We've also presented information to you showing what we have for our special events. Now, the list we gave you is only through the remainder of this fiscal year, through June 30th. And we wanted to just present some information to you for which of those special events may be, we may have some difficulty to continue until June 30th. For a lot of the special events, we provide a lot of resources to assist, whether it's our own special events or if we are assisting others who are trying to put on special events. So we presented some information on that to you as well. The other attachment shows you about the impacts, what the public may see. As we've mentioned before, we may not be able to continue to clean our restrooms at the level that we've done in the past, and also offer all the programs and services. So this was just to give you an idea of some of the things that we're looking at that the public will start to see moving forward, starting now, as well as going into the next fiscal year. We can't tell you exact details as to when this will happen and exactly how it will happen, because we don't know, of course, what our next fiscal year's budget is going to be. But that's the information we've presented to you.
Okay. And then also for our reference, the document you're referencing today is the one, attachment A, B, and C, that's listed as revised.
Yes.
Okay. My only question in dealing with this is that there are times in which you talk about cutting services or eliminating services on the weekend. Has the department done any evaluation as to their activity days to determine whether it's more appropriate because of volume to have a Sunday or Saturday open for longer periods than a Tuesday or Wednesday? Have we looked at those issues to see the least amount of impact as to current services?
That's what the part we're working on right now. Often what we find is that, as I mentioned before, the parks will always be accessible to the public, but there may not necessarily, and of course the parks are used more frequently on the weekends by families and so forth, but it may not be necessary for us to have staff at some of our facilities on the weekends. And then we're looking at which facilities it might be more appropriate for us to change the days that we operate or the times that we operate and so forth. For example, also for like our child care facilities, it may not be appropriate for us to be open certain hours if we're not providing a service. So we're trying to match the services and programs we provide with the times and days that the public needs it the most.
So what you've given us today on the revised is a general guideline, but you're doing more detail to get more specific as to what the scheduling will be, what parks may lose services. So this is basically the first cut.
Yes, and what we're doing is right now, because this is based upon what resources we have at the moment. As we mentioned, this will continue to change as we move forward with the reduction in more resources as we are expecting for the next fiscal year.
No, so you don't have the timeline at all. There's listed on attachment A, it talks about potential closures.
Yes. Also, what we're looking at is we may not, with the resources that we think we may have or may not have for next fiscal year and so forth, we may not be able to continue to have all of our facilities open. And so in this first round, we were looking at if we were going to have to potentially close the facility, what possibly might be that. We wanted to present that to you so you could start to see, what we think the facility may be up for closure. Because as our general manager, John Muckery, had mentioned to you, that is potentially where we may be heading.
And we asked, I think, after last week's meeting, the evening meeting, to go and present this to each of the council offices as well, not just budget and finance.
We did send that to each of the council offices last Thursday.
And so as elected official, as we're going forward, I'm not sure what we're doing today is adopting, saying we're okay with all of this, or
This is
we want you,
information.
just information.
If they were going to come back with much more refinement. The reason that we asked them for this report is we didn't want to get in the middle of a budgetary process, and also where cuts were being considered and people say they didn't know. And so we said, can you give us what you're contemplating, so that each district will know what you're contemplating, and then as you fine tune it, their input could come about. But this was the larger picture, so it's information.
Correct. And as I said, we're working with the information we have today. We don't know yet, as far as right now, the mayor's office is putting together the budget proposal to present to the council with the next couple of months, but we don't know exactly where that's going to go yet. But we wanted to provide information right now so that you'd have an idea of what we think, how things are looking for us.
But one of the things is driving these reports is the $2-point-something million on
To make it through to the end of this fiscal year.
what is it, on need, what's
The as needed.
as needed services that is not forthcoming.
Correct.
So that's driving to some degree what
Right.
you've given us.
Yeah, because that's what happened for this current fiscal year. We knew back in around May of last year, when the budget was being proposed for the current fiscal year, then we knew that we weren't going to have enough resources. And so we were a little late behind the ball because we were already approaching the summer season. And so we couldn't make the change as quickly as we needed to. And this time we're trying to be more proactive, realizing what's coming. And so we're trying to figure out where we're going to go with it, or potentially go with it.
So was your intent here to stay away from programmatic cuts? Or what principles guided you looking at these redirections?
Actually, the way we first see it, it probably will be more programs that will be affected going forward. That's exactly what we're looking at.
Okay.
Because for the current fiscal year in our budget reductions, we took a large hit on staffing for the maintenance side. And so the next time around, of course, it's going to have to take a bigger hit on the recreation programming side.
Okay. And I share the concern that Mr. Parks brought up, and that is to look at really when are these facilities being used most. So if we propose to cut Sundays off for certain pools, I know in my district, those pools are heavily used on Sundays, and perhaps if we look at it, we have to cut down one day, perhaps we look at a weekday that's not as heavily used as Sunday. I mean, Sundays when the families go out, and there's just in terms of numbers alone, some of these pools are used more often than the weekdays. And secondly, as we look at sharing staff amongst facilities, we should also look at particular facilities and what the impact would be, and not just put a blanket. We're going to get one consolidate here and consolidate there. For example, in the Bow Heights Sports Center, we're going to probably your proposal so far is to share that facility with others, but sometimes it's a very isolated area where graffiti and other vandalism may occur if we don't have someone there, and perhaps that's where we put that person and have them share there and have that be the focal point, look at issues like that. And I know that's an area that has had some disputes about who has the right permit to play soccer at the time, and particularly since we are going to have a new soccer field there. We know there's going to be a lot of folks going to that soccer field on the weekends to try to play there and to resolve these disputes. Some people may not understand that you need that permit, and so someone may have to be there to resolve those disputes. Things like this that I think may come up on particular sites, but I'm glad this is early in the discussion, so it helps us all decide where we would put the staffing if we do consolidate different facilities and staffing. And finally, we finally kicked off fireworks shows in CD14 after many years of absences, and I know that's near and dear to my heart because one of the reasons I brought back those fireworks shows is because I used to enjoy them as a kid. So we have them back now, and certainly we will do, and we fundraise quite a bit to make those fireworks shows happen. The private sector has stepped in. We've done our part as much as we can, but I think I would really be concerned if we don't have, I think the staffing is not really necessary at the events. It's the maintenance that's required, the crews, the cleanup crews afterwards. The city will need to do some part also, and not just have it privately funded. But I don't know, we could continue fundraising from the private sector since they do a big portion of these events. So that's just some thought. Thanks.
We appreciate that, and that's why we put this information out there for everyone so they can see potentially what's coming down the line. And also, too, if there are other opportunities for funding out there that you can bring to our attention that we can try to pursue. Of course, we're looking on our own for those types of things as well, but this is also to present information because we didn't want people to say that they didn't know, and we didn't want people to, because before we had a council member who said that he did not know that these types of discussions were already happening. And so we're trying to put this out there now. And if there's any other opportunities out there that can be brought to our attention, and also to receive your comments for any ideas or anything that maybe we have not thought about.
Yeah, just one particular question that's some generic. Kevin, everybody loves you on the west side.
Oh, thank you.
What about me?
So you're going to have to deal with
I'm sure they love Regina too.
You're going to have to deal with my issues when we get into my particulars, because they love you and you can take the hits. The first is, and this is just a big question about the, on one of your attachments, you talk about Muscle Beach program. There's a Muscle Beach annual event in Venice Beach, and that's somewhere in the summer. And that is a citywide event, and even Arnold shows up sometimes since he got his start in politics there,
Right.
lifting weights. That question for that is, what is the extent of services Rec and Park provide for the bodybuilding competition at Venice Beach? And inherent in that is, would cancellation at this point violate agreements with other event sponsors given the short notice of the day?
So that's a great question, and I have some good news, but I'll also answer the question. I'll start with the good news, and the good news is that I just met with Joe Wheatley, who's the sponsor of,
Great living legend.
isn't he a great guy? And I met
Guy here too.
just on Friday, last Friday, and we came to an agreement of how the department and Joe Wheatley Productions together can continue that event at a very small cost to the department. So what the city puts out into that event is primarily a lot of in-kind services. We do a lot of the preparation, staff time, equipment, we hang banners, we get everything ready, we clean up, steam clean the boardwalk, things like that. We also partner with Joe Wheatley Productions because he really brings in all of the sponsors, he puts on all the competition, spends a lot of money to do that. So what we're doing is, in return for that, we've done what we call like a co-sponsorship. So we're not charging every fee that we would charge to an event that wasn't sponsored with the department. And while we're not waiving any fees, he is paying his fees according to the commission-approved rates and fees. But we've been able to work out a way that the department can also be a part of that event. So it's going to continue.
Very appreciate that, because Joe Wheatley is a living legend and
Right.
has done a lot for Venice Beach
Right.
on many levels. Second question is a general one, too, for the whole city. Partnership with nonprofit recreation organizations. As we get into this crunch, such as the Little League or the youth soccer, to continue providing service, can we find not-for-profits, groups that can maybe step up to the plate a little more vigorously instead of cutting back on programs, challenge them to bring more revenue into it? Can we be more creative? I don't want to go through any of my particulars at this point, but I have a sense that I can beat the bushes with community, and it's possible that maybe community could pick up more costs rather than cutting back on programs.
Yes, I think that's very true. The department is definitely open to that. Our general manager has given all of the executive staff and the senior staff of the department that direction and vision that we would seek out more partnerships. So we're open to that, and wherever, because in reality, the department provides these services in many ways. We do a lot of self-operation of rec services, but if we permit a Little League or an AYSO soccer, that's the city still putting on that recreational opportunity for the public. So we're very open to that, and that is part of our idea here of trying to cut costs.
And then I would ask you specifics when it comes to my district, wherever you think you're going to cut on something, give us enough warning so we can work with private sector community and with your leadership and get those partnerships. Okay?
Absolutely.
The next one is really simple for me, but I'm not necessarily right. I always sense that during the weekday, for the most part, kids are in school. They should be in school.
Right.
And so I don't mind a Tuesday morning having no staff there. I care about the seniors who come for lunches.
Right.
And they need to be respected in their time. But I have no problem with eliminating a Tuesday morning or a Wednesday morning, cut my hours. No way do I want to cut back on weekend hours. That's the leisure family opportunity in all my parks and all my pools and all my situations. I don't want to cut back Saturdays or Sundays, period.
Right, so let me speak to that just a little bit to try to give the council members a little bit of comfort level on that. We've looked at all of our attendance, and our slowest days in terms of recreational programming inside the rec center. That's a program that's being put on by the rec directors, by the part-time staff, a dance program, a basketball program, whatever. Our slowest days are Sunday and Monday. So it doesn't mean the slowest day at the park is Sunday or Monday. And you're right about the kids being in school. We have to be open when the kids are not in school because that's when they come to the park. They come to the park after they get out of school. So Saturday is a huge day for us inside the rec center. We've got basketball going, cultural classes, dance, you name it. Okay, so we have to be open on Sundays and on Saturdays, and there's no intent to close those days. But Sunday inside the rec center, at many rec centers, is a very quiet day for programming. So our thought was a Sunday closure of the rec center, because typically we only have some part-time staff there to watch the fields and whatnot. A lot of the activity on Sunday is a huge day for outdoor activity, for soccer play, for just people that want to come and throw a football around, picnickers, you name it. So the parks and all of the amenities will be open. Perhaps the recreation center themselves is what would be closed due to the fact that we wouldn't have any organized programming inside that day anyway. And lastly, on the pools, the Sunday closures, and I should have clarified this. If we didn't, I apologize. But the Sunday closures were intended in the swimming pools only during in the year-round pools. So during the summertime, of course, we're going to be open on the Sundays because that's a big day. But there are many year-round pools that go all year long, and we were looking at Sunday as being kind of a slow day on the year-round pools.
Well, it makes a lot of sense to what you're saying. I appreciate you saying that. We have park advisory committees. I consider them as important to me as I do neighborhood councils. They're involved, engaged, and care. I want to make sure that wherever in my district now, I'm getting specific here, we're talking any hours or any shifting, that the park advisory committee are part of the process, and that they have access to the councilmen to share their concerns if they have concerns. They're my first troops. I mean, I have some ladies with their children there who are very passionate in all of my parks, and that means a lot to me, is how they feel. So I would appreciate consulting with park advisory committees as an essential part of your process of determining hours. Get that?
Yeah, that's a great recommendation. Thank you.
I want to make sure we do that going forward. Another one is, I hate to say this again, but when I was a corporate guy, we put org charts up, and we looked at every position within my company to determine if we sunset it or continue it. And I would like you, as part of your process, not just your people in the field, but your corporate, which I would call corporate, I'll call it your administrative arm downtown. Maybe there's some dancing lemons and other situations we can talk about in civil servants who are senior, who might, it's time for them to get a buyout or get out or whatever. But I'd like to get some comfort on that we've looked at those levels of democracy. Okay?
Absolutely, and I think the general manager has that same concept.
Okay. And the last one is, if we determine we want to close this or that for this time frame or that time frame, I want a real dollar figure next to it. Not the charts here that don't tell me what money I'm saving, but exactly if we do this, it means X dollars. And so I want to put it in dollars and cents. Can we get that?
Sure. Thank you.
I'd like to just add one thing here. As far as for us, part of what we're looking at is about what are the days and hours that would be the best match for what the public wants. There's one thing that we did bring to the city administrative office attention was that, of course, for the staff, when we're looking at possibly changing the work days and hours for their unions, we have to go back and work with them on that, because that is something that definitely is something that we're looking at that needs to be addressed. But of course, we have to work that out with their union representatives.
Let me just ask one other thing, and this may be a parochial issue in the 8th District. When you talk about activities within the facility as being an indicator as far as whether staff is needed, what we find in many instances in our parks that there's also a very important issue of supervision on the playground. And the last thing we want is the strongest personality is running the park facility because there's no identifiable supervision on campus. And so we need to balance that, because some of those parks can be taken over immediately by the strongest personality or people deciding who gets to play and not play. And I think we need to make sure that we not make the decision on personnel, park personnel, strictly on how many activities are indoors. Because when there's a lot of activity in the park, there's a need of somebody that represents the park to at minimum referee and to be there as a sounding board as to what the activities are.
No, that's an excellent point, and a point well taken. And I think that in our discussions, as we were trying to put all of these different ideas together, we did look at that and realize that exactly that is the truth. And many times why we even have staff on board on those particular days is just to have the supervision, to have someone there. What we were looking at is, in those particular cases, perhaps there's other ways to fund those individuals so they can still be there. For example, if municipal sports has a lot of permits, a lot of adult permits that day for softball, soccer, flag football, whatever, then municipal sports could take in the fees and possibly fund that rather than having it funded by the general fund. So we're looking at those types of options as well.
Thank you very much. We'll move item 12A. And again, it's an informational document, and what I would hope when this gets to council, that every council member would review this and get with Rec and Park and start looking at ways that they can create their unique response to their community with the information that you provide.
Thank you, committee members. As you've mentioned, you brought up a lot of important things here. That's why it's taken us some time to work out all this information. As you can see, there are a lot of things to consider.
Thank you.
Item number 12B on the agenda is a continuing conversation relative to the status of the state Proposition 1B funds and its impact on street services.
Good afternoon. The report you're referencing is the one received last week, dated January 16th.
Yes, we have a CAO report, an update dated January 30th.
30th?
Same thing.
I don't have 30th.
This basically says ditto.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Mr. Robertson?
Good afternoon. Bill Robertson, Director of the Bureau of Street Services. I think the report before you is an update. We've worked very closely with the CAO on trying to address the major issues facing the city of Los Angeles in regards to not only the loss of 1B money, but the potential loss of gas tax and Prop $42. But since this is the CAO's report, I'll defer to David and let him make a few comments, and then I'll answer any questions that you may have.
Good afternoon. David Hirano from the CAO's office. At your last meeting of January 26th, you asked us to come back and to continue conversations with you regarding the situation with the state placing a hold on Prop 1B. Since that last conversation, we have been informed of discussions occurring at the state level that would do more than just withhold Prop 1B funds from us temporarily, but would also potentially withdraw or withhold gas tax funds for a period of 6 months and Prop 42 funds for a period of 3 months. We ultimately don't know if that will occur at the state level, but given the size of the impacts, we are beginning to look at what we would do with that. A loss of approximately 6 months worth of gas tax funds would be on the order of magnitude of about $36 million. And a loss of 3 months worth of Prop 42 funds would be on the order of magnitude of about $13 million. One caveat in that is that we are seeing a decline in gas tax as we know it now, so those numbers could be even less. Given the size of the impact and given where those monies are appropriated in the city budget, the biggest potential impact is going to be on the Bureau of Street Services and the resurfacing program. In looking at what we might do with that, we have discovered that if the state were to act immediately and force these impacts down on us, then we would incur approximately a $28 million deficit in the current city budget from the way the city budget is handled. As such, we've been working with Bureau of Street Services, the Mayor's Office, the CLA, to take steps to address the situation. Effective about last week, Bureau of Street Services has stopped initiating new resurfacing projects funded from these three sources, Prop 1B, gas tax, and Prop 42, and shifted their focus to resurfacing using Prop C dollars, which would be transit corridors, and federal monies, which would be major highways within the city, and some off-budget work that they may have funded from grants. In addition, the Mayor's Office has indicated they've begun conversations with the state trying to get us some legislative relief or at least get the state to allow us different options in how we fix this budget problem that they potentially will give us. And the Bureau of Street Services has also taken a short pause in hiring while we figure out what we're going to do and whether this impact will actually land on us or not. Our office as well has started going through the budget, trying to identify other adjustments that we might take. The adjustments I just described to you would be designed just not to increase the $28 million deficit, but to hold it steady. We do need to, if this impact occurs to us, we will need to find a way of balancing this, otherwise it will be an impact on your reserve fund for the year. So in the memo we have provided to you, we've outlined some alternatives as to where we might go. None of them are set, none of them are done. We just thought you might ask what kinds of things we're considering. If you have any suggestions, we will be very glad to look at them as well. But there are two things I want to emphasize in this conversation. While this is a potential impact, it has not happened yet. So we don't know what the state will do ultimately. We do think that they are going to be very tempted to take money from us, at least temporarily, because of the size and magnitude of their issue. The second thing I want to emphasize is in this $28 million deficit, I would urge you not to consider this a problem that Street Services has created. It is, in our view, not a problem they've created. They are a victim of the situation and have done everything they possibly can to try and meet their resurfacing program and laid out by the council and the mayor.
Let me just ask, on the report you've given us dated January 30th, these are recommendations. Is the intent to get more precise as it relates to these recommendations in the FSR in the future? If we accept this note and file it, we're not causing these programs to dissipate today.
No, you're not. We will we'll ultimately have to see what the total impact is. Right now, this is our best guess on paper. And then once we know that total impact, then we will have we'll have a target for one as to what we need to do, and then we will come back with more specific recommendations.
And so I can understand it clearly, the $28 million we're talking about, that's not funds that we spent that we have to go and find other funds. This is work that will go incomplete. We will not get to do $28 million worth of work.
No, sir. The $28 million deficit occurs because we have during the course of the year we spend daily and we get paid back in lump sums. there are instances during the course of normal business where our spending will exceed the amount of revenue we've taken in, and we're just waiting for the next lump sum to come in and make us whole. Essentially, we're taking a short-term loan from the reserve fund when we do that. What the state is proposing to do would be to interrupt that flow of lump sum payments, and if they do that, they would leave us in a position that would be $28 million short. Essentially, you'd have a $28 million reserve fund loan that is we can't pay back.
$28 million reserve fund loan if we did all this work.
If you stop where you are now, as of January 26th. If you continue to do additional work funded that would be traditionally funded from Prop 1B, gas tax, and Prop 42, you will increase that potential deficit. So Mr. Robertson has done what we view as a responsible thing and shifted his focus from the resurfacing of those particular streets to resurfacing of streets that are transit corridors and federal highways, highways that qualify for federal money, and some off-budget work to avoid increasing that potential deficit until we know whether we're going to get the money or not.
Okay. I'm still unclear on one thing. When we talk about these funds may not be coming, that's what you're basically saying, these
Yes.
gas funds and whatever. Mr. Robertson in his budget had basically decided early on that he was going to do so many sidewalks, so many paving of so many miles of streets. So if the money's not coming, he's not going to do the work, as opposed to we're going to have to go find $28 million to fill a hole in the budget. I'm trying to figure out, is this real money, or does it mean that if we stop these projects today, that's $28 million we do not have and we won't spend?
He has been very efficient and has done work pretty much ahead of the receipts, and that's normal practice. And we do, if we don't get these payments, we will be $28 million in the hole.
But the thing is, have we done the work already?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so this is, all right, we've done, all right, that's what's unclear.
Yes.
So we've done the work, and the thing is, we're waiting for the reimbursements.
Correct.
Okay, and so by shifting to other work, there is still a $28 million hole that raises our reserve fund deficit.
Correct.
Okay, so that wasn't clear.
Yeah, and if I may, Councilmember Parks, is that the reality is the program as we sit right today, as David mentioned, is we don't have a deficit. We only have a deficit if the state takes the action that we're all hearing that they may take. Now, that action is sweeping the gas tax from January to July. The good news is the city received its January payment. Now, that doesn't mean that they may now take 5 months and 1 month next year. Who knows what the state's going to do? And I think that's taking precaution and shifting the focus from 1B gas tax Prop 42 and moving it to the restricted dollars is just a cushion so that we don't have an increased deficit if the state does take this action. For those that don't know, it's simply put, and the CAO described it very well in their report, it's like when you hire somebody to redo your kitchen. You don't pay them up front. You may give them a portion of the dollars. That may come from the general fund. It may come from other funding that we receive. And you don't pay the contractor until your work is completed. And that's what happens to us. Every month we get the allocation of the state gas tax, and the Prop 42 is quarterly. So it's on the come. We're doing the work, waiting for the revenue to come back in to repay the general fund or whoever funding sources we're using to front the work. Otherwise, we would be sitting there waiting for the dollars to come in and then say, okay, let's go start and do $3 million worth of work. We would accomplish nothing, and it would be extremely inefficient.
Let me ask the CAO on, if they do what we perceive, where would that raise our reserve fund deficit?
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know the details on reserve fund deficit. Mr. Luther, do you know?
I'm trying to understand Mr. Parks' question.
No, if this comes true, we already know we have a several $1 million reserve fund hole coming up between now and June 30th. What would it be if this $28 million was realized as relates to a
The
deficit?
last time that we reported to council on the status of the reserve fund, I believe we had about $35 million in the contingency account. In our next FSR, which we'll release in approximately 1 week, that'll be updated, but from the last time I reported, there was a $35 million
We said $35 million that was on contingency.
in a contingency.
But then we also projected there was going to be a shortfall that would take us to June 30th.
That, again, in the last time we reported back, that shortfall was about minus 17 million. And those figures have all changed. I mean, that was, we're looking at probably information that's at least a month old, maybe a month and a half old.
Does this 28 million here add to the 17, or
Yes.
does it subtract from the 35?
It would be, I would say it would be subtracted from the 35. We had not proposed in our last document that we would take that 17 million from the reserve fund. We had not tied the two together. I think our plan, and probably our current plan, is to still try to balance the expenditure and revenue deficit aside from the reserve fund. But it would reduce the 35 million that we had reported by 28 million.
Sorry?
I was just going to report, I was in Sacramento a week ago at the League of Cities, and their analysts were reporting that Prop 42 and gas tax were at great risk, is what the words they used, but 1B would be okay, so they felt we were going to see the 1B money this year, and they felt all of it. So just, it's in close line to what you're saying here, is pretty much what they were telling us in Sacramento. One question, as we're looking at the federal stimulus projects that we put in for, if we were to lose 42 funding and gas tax funding, eliminating a lot of that work, would you be able to shift your crews then all of the stimulus projects that we've lined up for, or is there going to be a real disruption in your workforce?
Well, I think right now, as part of the stimulus package that went to the feds, we had approximately $20 million in that stimulus package for resurfacing. Certainly, if we lose these dollars, we could supplement, and we would be able to handle that
Break
with no
even
problem.
about it.
Yes.
Yeah, cool, okay. And one last thing, just for everybody's knowledge, that the one thing that the analysts told us was if it wasn't for Prop 1A a couple years ago, they'd be killing us right now, but they can't touch an awful lot of it, so we did a good thing there.
My question, just to follow up, shovel-ready projects is the phrase everybody's now using. Does Caltrans get in the middle of any of your stuff?
No, not specifically to my bureau, no.
Good. Thank you for your preemptive strategy.
Let me just say, on the one item, and again, even though this is merely advising us the potential, I think the one item that concerns me on the street furniture account, I think the council has already taken a hit on reduction of its office budget, and that would come strictly out of their budget. So I would ask that we amend this report. We note and file it, but we amend it to remove that reference to the street furniture revenue of $3.8 million. But we send it forward, these recommendations or these thoughts as where the potential savings could come from. So we move 12B with that amendment.
Item 12C on the agenda is the CAO report relative to pedestrian signal heads with countdown features. We had discussed this several times in committee, and I think the new information today is just the CAO report.
Angela Berman, CAO. Although discontinuing the installation of the pedestrian signal heads with the countdown feature would result in savings of about $170,000 in 2009-10 and 2010-11, the CAO and DOT recommend continuing to install these signal heads, primarily because of the public safety feature that these countdown features provide. Also, it should be noted that there's a potential that the FHWA will mandate the installation of these signal heads in the near future. And finally, there would be no savings in 08-09 due to the department already purchasing this equipment for these installations this year.
And your reference is the report January 23rd?
Yes, 23rd.
Okay, we'll move item 12C, note and file.
Item 12D was also discussed in committee. It was a fire department report relative to available resources for funding the EMS captain position.
Yeah, that's what I think we have.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
we were advised on Friday that Public Safety Committee did not schedule this item.
Okay, where's David? Did they advise us this morning?
Yes.
That they advised if we're going to take this up, they'll waive it.
Great.
Okay, so that's as of this morning. Okay. Chief?
Good afternoon. At the last Budget and Finance hearing, the Fire Department presented a proposal that we would ask to do to cover basically two items, the $2.8 or $2.9 million deficit for the EMS Captains 18. There were resolution authorities as well as the $3.8 million FLSA lawsuit that had been imposed upon the department. At that hearing, we presented a proposal that actually brought in $10.2 million, which would cover the cost of the EMS captains, the ambulance that we were anticipating closing, as well as the 3.8, and leave an additional $3 million for the rest of the city's budget deficit. Unfortunately, we didn't get the document to the CLA and the CAO in enough time prior to that meeting for them to do an analysis, so we were asked to come back after they'd done that analysis, and that's why we're here.
Let me ask the CAO, when could we expect it? We wanted to move this today based on the conversations we had last week, and so that's why we went to public safety and got them to waive it. So when can we expect a CAO report?
In 2 weeks? We could have something for you in 2 weeks.
Can we do?
It's Mark Davis from CAO's office.
What's the 2 weeks for? Because we've been waiting on this, I think, well over 2 to 3 weeks, so.
We had just received the fire department report last Monday, and I think part of the confusion was we expected it to be scheduled at public safety as well today, and we were waiting instructions from public safety to prepare a report so we can do a report. We'll try to have expedite it before 2 weeks.
Yeah. Let me ask, do we have a meeting next Monday?
Yes, in West Los Angeles.
Okay, because I'd like to see, I wouldn't like to wait for 2 weeks. If we can get their report done for the next meeting so we can move it forward, because I think the budget process is going to be as difficult as it is for next year. We need to solidify this for this year. And the thing is, I think what was discussed last week pretty much gave us an indication as to resources that have been identified. Now, the one thing I disagree with the chief a little bit, those are not all his funds. They really belong to the general fund, but at some point, we'd be making allocations back to make your budget right. But the issue is that I believe with the cap and a variety of issues, and we've already moved the issue of the, the fire hydrants. That was moved last week, 1.5 million. So we'd just like to get this solidified so that we can give the chief some understanding as to what his budget's going to look like through June 30th before he has to ramsack it for July 1st through next year. So can we get that commitment?
Yeah.
Get it next Monday?
Yes.
I mean, because otherwise, I mean, we've been at this back and forth.
Long time.
Yeah, and because I think public safety, I was there on another issue a couple weeks ago, also kind of
Right.
fine with the resolution that had been drafted.
But I think what's different from your report from the meeting last week is we talked about restoring the 18 as opposed to the 9.
That's correct.
And so that's the difference. But we need to get the CLA and the CAO to do something definitive for us by next Monday, so we won't have the chief back here another time, because I think we pretty well agreed on what direction we're going in. Although, again, it's not all your money, chief.
Okay. We're going to try.
As long as you get the money, you're okay with
Right.
it, right?
Right. As long as we cover it, we can call it anybody's money.
Possession.
If I could just ask a question. I wasn't at the last meeting, but at one meeting it was mentioned that if we cut the training class, that it would lead to more overtime in the future.
Correct.
Now, have we done estimates in terms of dollar amount, how much that overtime?
Yeah, we have a range because, like I said at that meeting, it depends on, that estimate originally was determined based on how many people are in the drop program who have to leave. If we have more people retired that didn't really have to leave, it would increase the amount of overtime. Or if the attrition rate in our academy, we don't lose as many people in our academy. So the range is somewhere between $500,000 and $1.2 million, depending on those variables.
$500,000, yeah. So that's not, I just want to make sure that's not costing us more than we're saving at this time by doing these adjustments.
The cost for the drill towers, that one class, we're talking about one class of $1.8 million.
1.8. And it's going to cost us how much in overtime?
Somewhere between half a million and 1.2, somewhere between there, depending on those variables.
That's later, yeah, okay.
Okay. And the issues that, if we use your January 9th report, we're looking at cutting that the fifth recruit class, but also not impacting 09-10 scheduling of classes. The other issue is that now it's basically 18 EMS captains, and then maintaining the variable staffing for the 2 ambulances, and then the reduction from the transportation equipment account.
Correct.
Those are the 4 items.
Well, the 4 items, that was the report I gave a couple of weeks ago before we found the additional money to cover for the 4 ambulances and the 18 EMS captains. So we'd like to...
Is it 4 ambulances or 2?
There are 4.
4.
4.
Okay.
Our plan at that time was to close down 4 overtime staffed ambulances to cover the cost of EMS captains.
So those are the 4 items we're moving forward on, but we have to collect those resources that the chief has identified in that one report so that we can move forward. Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay, we will have that report next week,
Be here.
and so appreciate your patience.
Chair, I think you do have a speaker.
I'm sorry. One speaker card, Mr. McCosker.
Given that it's going to be back next week, I'll just save my comments until next day.
All right, thank you.
Oh, good to see you again.
I'm out of breath.
Item number 13
So,
is a...
okay, so we continue to 12E.
Yep.
Is that right?
Watch yourself.
Okay.
Item number 13 is a Board of Review report relative to a request to write off delinquent accounts receivable over and under 1,000 per account totaling $1.648 million.
Thank you very much.
I'm Louis Benjamin, representing the City Controller as chairperson of the Accounts Receivable Board of Review. The board met on December 17, 2008, to consider write-off requests from 5 different departments. And at that meeting, we will look at all items, but for the purpose of this committee, we only refer to this committee items at $1,000 and over for approval. But in this particular case, since the Office of Finance represented 4 departments and presented write-off items of 722 accounts that totaled $1.3 million plus. And this was supposed to be the first group of accounts that office would sell. We included this and presented this to the for City Council to approve also, because we thought it was a one-time deal. Since then, I think they have sold some other accounts, so this may not be the first group of accounts that they sell.
Let me ask you to clarify one thing. I was not clear. When they said they're selling them, so therefore that's one more step in our process. So in effect, we're not resolving them at this time? They're still out pending until they get a sale for them?
No.
Or do we have to declare them in some degree to some category before they can go out and sell that debt?
According to the admin code, the accounts have to be approved to write off. They have to be written off first before they
So
can
we
sell.
have to write them off first?
Yes.
And then they can sell them?
Yes.
Okay. Now, do they have the ability to sell everything that you brought forward to us on all 4 of these 5 departments?
I would presume so.
Yes, we do.
Okay. And you're telling us that the other several $100,000 was written off at $1,000 and below by the board. Now, do they go out to get sold as debt, or what happens to them?
They could.
They'll all be lumped in together.
So they'll go out to be sold. All of the debt will be sold.
All of that is written off, we intend to sell.
Okay. So that gives us a total of 1.6 will go out to be sold. So is that right?
Well, of these accounts, that is correct. The first package or the first bundle that we anticipate selling is going to be approximately $5.9 million.
Okay, so this is part of a larger package?
That is correct.
Okay, but again, the process is that we have to declare them as being not surplus, but that they are that we cannot collect them, they're uncollectible.
That all of our efforts have been exhausted in
And
order.
then once we get to that point, they can then go out and sell them.
That is correct.
Now, do we have I don't know if we've ever been told, what is the dollar amount, what is the percentage? Is it a case-by-case of what you can sell debt?
It is a case-by-case basis. Realistically, when we initiated this process, we assumed one thing, but as we know, the economy has gone in a very negative direction, and there is a lot of bad paper on the market. So we want to maximize it as best we can, but we will see what the market bears.
So when will we know, how long will it take, or when will we get an idea of what we might be selling the debt for?
We have a preliminary bid process out, and normally we're talking about a cent or two on the dollar. But these are accounts, again, that we would be writing off with zero value.
And then the other thing I was wondering, when you look at this, and so many of them say out of statute, do we make any assessment to see if there was real due diligence before they went out of statute?
We do, and in fact, we have actually stepped that up and are in the process of making sure we don't really want to allow these to go out of statute. All of these, we've had internal collection efforts. We've sent them out to our contracted collection agencies, who have also concurred that we haven't been able to receive anything. With these kind of accounts, a industry standard is to what they call scrub the accounts, to look at bankruptcies, deaths, et cetera, and with some of these accounts, and a percentage, I would say between 15 and 18%, that applies. So it makes them all the more uncollectible.
If they're still in statute, does that give us a higher rate of expectation on selling debt?
Yes, correct. Normally we would. That is correct.
I look at some of these and wonder why it's been so many years before we've gotten to this point on writing these debts off. Why do we take so long to come to a point where you bring the account and say, well, we can't collect on this? It would seem to me after like 6 or 9 months, we go to a really aggressive collection agent or something, and we should have these things resolved in a year after that. I mean, some of these are 4, 5, 6, 7 years old.
I concur. With this first group, these are all judgments. Judgments are usually in effect for 10 years. So we tried.
So we got judgments and couldn't collect on the fees.
That is correct.
Okay.
I could just ask the last question, Office of Finance, where you say 722 accounts receivable totaling $1.37 million for uncollectible fee charged to customers of LAPD, Board of Public Works, Rackham Park, and DOT. And that's a good figure here. According to the officer, all of these accounts were sent to the collection agency, and collection efforts were unsuccessful. The other ones, you said we reached our limit of, but you don't say it on this effort, or have we lost any time frame left to deal with the statute of limitations?
If I understand your question correctly, you mean if there's still time left on the statute?
On any of those, yeah.
There is. But most of those are aged. We have exhausted all of our efforts, and as opposed to just allowing the statutes to run, we thought it prudent to sell those while there is some time, so that they would have some value.
So when you sell them, what kind of sale do you figure you get?
And again, it's very, very minimal. A penny to 2 on the dollar.
And the agencies you're going to sell it to, do they have a track record of aggressively collecting?
They are, or they do, rather. One of the things that in initiating this program, and as you know, the sale of debt is something, or the sale of accounts receivable is something very new. So we're trying to learn in the process as well, so that in the future we'll be able to maximize our upfront collection efforts as best we can.
I just hope that we give it to one of these groups and then go out and bang down a lot of doors, take a lot of money in, that can be somewhat depressing from our end. Plus, the person on the other end that owes the money feels that blunt and part of the city of Los Angeles, the city of Los Angeles, so we can get some bad PR at the same time we get no money, right?
Well, we don't want bad publicity, but at the same token, given the economic times, we do want to maximize our collections.
In that point, when we're looking at 1.37 million, did we look at different agencies and their tactics and how they do things? Because I can tell you, not me, thank God, but people are starting to get some really rough trade thrown at them, collection agencies. It's getting pretty ugly out there.
If you're referring to our city contracted collection agencies?
Yeah, I'm asking, how are these folks, what's their reputation like that you're selling it to?
And we've made sure that we've, through a screening process, that they would be able to handle this both tactfully and effectively. But the city contracted collection agencies that we're utilizing are different than these people. They specialize on a secondary, aggressive kind of collection, and many of them are either legal firms or have some tie-in to legal processes.
Will we have any opportunity to monitor their tactics and how they deal with it, or do we just write it off and let them deal with it, and that's the end of that?
I note your concern. The process normally is that we would write it off. They would become the property of that firm, and that's pretty much it.
And do you have the blessing of the city attorney's office and the mayor's office as this being a new strategy?
We do.
Let me just ask, on the, is it by charter, the 1,000 borderline or platform? Or is that an administrative code? How did we create the 1,000 is dealt with, below 1,000 dealt one fashion, and over 1,000 comes to the council? Is that by charter?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but that was through an internal policies and procedures document. It was developed and blessed by the committee when the Board of Review was originally reconvened.
Okay. Do we know how long ago that was?
Approximately 2.5 years.
Let me ask the CAO and the CLA, the fact that now that all of our debt is going to go to that secondary market after we give it to our folks that will attempt to recover, could we look at the prospects of changing, and particularly in the financial era that we're in, changing possibly that write-off from 1,000 and below to maybe that the board looks at 5,000 and below, and it comes to council at above 5,000 or something like that, that we raise the amount, because they're all going to end up in the secondary market, but it would probably send the larger cases to the council, because dealing with every $1,000, I would assume that would cut a lot of workload, bringing it to the council, but they're going to be dealt with, I understand it, in the same way as a board of review. They'll go directly from there to the secondary market as opposed to coming to the council.
Your understanding is absolutely correct.
And I would just ask, there's nothing statutorily that would basically prohibit it that you're aware of?
In terms of the change of amount?
Well, somebody had decided on $1,000 is
that was an arbitrary amount. So
okay.
No.
Okay, could you look at that and let us know? Because I think it would save a lot of stuff flowing, and particularly if they're all going to end up in the same pot, we might save ourselves a lot of time and hassle. Okay?
Yes.
So we'll move that item 13.
Item number 14 is Department of Building and Safety report relative to a refund request in the amount of $175,460.14 for plan check and refundable surcharges.
Move it.
I just was going to approve it. I just want to know why they took 20% of the guy's money for 1 week of work.
Oh.
Is anybody here from the staff? The question I had is I didn't quite understand. It appeared we gave this to planning and or building and safety, and they had it for 1 week, and yet when the person requested the refund, we kept 20% of the funds based on clerical and overhead costs. I was trying to figure out how did we accumulate 20% of the funds on 1 week of holding the project.
I think it's a good question. I'm sure the answer is that it was done because of the current policies, procedures, or ordinances that affect how much they can withhold, but we can get Building and Safety to respond to this issue at council if you
Okay,
choose to wish.
because the issue, it appears, is a couple of them, they say are non-refundable, but I don't think those come up to the 20%. And if somebody gave you, it appears, these documents on February the 22nd, and call back and said on the 28th, do not do plan check, and we say we're going to keep 20% of your money, I just don't know if that's...
We can
I'd
have
have that job.
We can ask Building and Safety
Okay.
to respond to that at council if you
Okay.
wish to move it forward.
with those.
But if they owed us the money, we'd never see it, so.
Okay, next item.
All right, item number 15 is a motion, Smith, Cardenas, and the CAO to report relative to a request for a loan in the amount of $2.2 million from the Public Works Trust Fund to cover the federal reimbursable portion of projects funded under the Safety Lou Federal Transportation Funding Act.
Because you want 800,000 gas tax.
Good afternoon. Gina Mancha, Bureau of Street Services, Citywide Capital Planning and FHWA Grants Administration.
David Harano with the CAO. Mr. Luther, did you say there was a CAO report on it?
It was just, I just have one issue.
Okay, just verbal? Okay.
The report, I think, is self-explanatory. I'm just wondering from the prior report that we had on 12, where they, or maybe 13, whatever it was, they talked about gas tax money may not be available, yet in this report, we're looking to front-load these projects with almost $900,000 of gas tax money. Are these projects in jeopardy based on the previous report?
Based on our previous report, definitely gas tax receipts are down for the year, and definitely there is a need to look at readjusting our budget. We have, these projects do have gas tax appropriations to them, and if the council wanted, we could go back and look at deferring or halting them. However, they are highly leveraged with federal dollars, and it would not be the first place that we would go to look to balance the budget.
That's the only concern I had, is that if they're moving forward on these projects, and yet we have another report saying gas tax money may not be available, that we not hamper these, because that's several $1 million of federal money.
We would agree with you, sir.
So we can guarantee that these $800,000 plus will be there.
That is our intent. As you know, the state has
So
its
we don't
own
have
mind.
this money
If
in
they do
hand.
more damage to us, we might be back.
But this money's not in hand, it still depends on the state giving it to us.
So if
No,
it do-
I'm sorry, the gas tax, these are appropriations to the gas tax capital program, and we can pretty much fund these from
You
money.
have this money, that's all I want to make
yes,
sure.
we can do that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Best news of the day.
And there hasn't been much of it lately, so.
I just have a minor revision that I would like to request that be noted to the record and forwarded on to full committee. The original motion that was introduced to Public Works Committee cited $6.8 million. That's the amount that the the Public Works Office of Accounting will be able to float us on an annual basis. But the current balance for 0809 is actually 4.7. And I just wanted to make a minor, a technical revision to that.
So you just identifying that there's more money than we thought, or?
No, what it is that we have an arrangement with the Office of Accounting that on any given year we can borrow a maximum of $6.8 million, but that's provided we restore our outstanding balance. So we still have a 2.1 balance from the previous loan that we're working on federal reimbursements. So the amount we're entitled to for a 2008-09 loan would be 4.7. We're really only asking for 2.2, so we're fine on that. We just need to correct the record.
The key is that both sums of money are there.
Pardon?
I said the key is that both sums of money are there for these projects.
Yes, yes. But I just wanted to make sure that everything's completely correct when we're referencing the available balance.
Okay, we'll move item 15.
Items,
with those assurances.
Thank you, sir.
We can take item 16, item 17, and item number 1 on the special agenda all together.
Yes.
Okay. These are city treasurer investment and cash management reports for the periods, months ending August 31st through end of November 2008.
Thank you. We're going to move all four of these reports, but I would guess the number 18 is the most recent. And so if you can kind of give us an update of since November 30th to present, what we might be confronted with.
Okay, we actually tried to squeeze the December report in. It's at City Clerk, but we got it in just a little bit too late. I'm going to, Joya DeForest, City Treasurer, I'm going to ask Hal to talk a little bit about what the feds did in December and the impact going forward, we think, for our revenue estimates this year. In summary, it's still been difficult. We're still trending ahead of our revenue estimates as we speak today, but there's no guarantee for the rest of the year. We're all holding our breath to see what the stimulus package does or doesn't do, and who does what to whom when it finally gets approved. But with that, I'll give it to Hal.
Sure. As we all know, we've faced some of the worst credit environment that we've seen since the Great Depression. In terms of what we expect going forward, we expect short-term rates as measured by the Fed funds target rate to remain low in the 0 to 0.25 range for the next quarter or two. Longer-term rates are also going to remain relatively low, but we're going to we expect to see a gradual increase in rates in quarter 3 and quarter 4 of this year. And what that means for the city is that reinvestment rates or investment returns are going to remain relatively low through the end of this fiscal year, and then perk up a slight bit in Q3 and Q4 of this year.
Well, that's our expectation. That's barring any another catastrophic event in the market does not happen. We just don't know. But as far as the portfolio, we recently had our S&P rating reaffirmed as AAA, so we're still doing well there. And we're trending, let's see if I remember right, about 0.5% better than the benchmark on the short-term portfolio, and about 0.75% better on the longer-term portfolio.
Let me ask you one other thing. Aside from these reports, have you, I think we've had discussions prior about your personnel. Have you gotten all of those in play as it relates to your office? And I thought you were trying to get some treasurer-specific positions that deal with your operations. Have all those come to pass?
Well, I'm happy to report after 3 years that the Personnel Department, CAO, and Treasury, we all seem to now agree that there was an existing classification in the city, and we have proposed those changes for our fiscal 09-10 budget. 2 weeks ago on board, we now have our new Director of Cash Management Services. One of, it's our gain, but the banking industry's lost. He was one of the ones laid off from a commercial bank, so he stepped in, and we've given him the charge to make us better and more efficient, with his critical eye coming in, look at our operations and our personnel, and report recommendations for improvement.
One other thing, last time I talked to you, you were telling me, since we brought on that technology bond edge, what is the figure you think that we've reaped from that?
It's in excess of $50 million from the time we purchased it to today.
Yeah, Bondage has been a wonderful tool. It's not only helped provide us fine bonds that are undervalued that have done reasonably well, but we've also avoided some real landmines, such as the issue with Lehman Brothers. So it's been a wonderful tool, and that's in large part attributes to our success.
One of the key measures or analytics it has in it is the probability of default, and we have used it, our baseline single-digit probability of defaults for companies over the next 5 years. Anytime it gets into double digits, we really start looking at that more closely and make a conscious decision usually to sell.
How are we performing in our general pool compared to Chicago, New York?
Well,
how do we compare in our general pool in terms of performance when we compare ourselves to Chicago and New York in these last 6 months?
And I would have to report back on that. It's really difficult to compare because we all have different investment rules and investment goals and different prohibitions of what you can and cannot invest. Chicago, I don't know. The only other, as I recall, the only other cities with triple A's at all, and we're the only one that has both triple A's, is one is Houston, and
New York and Chicago don't have AAAs?
I don't know that they ask for ratings. I will check, but when we used to have a report, there were only like 3 cities in the country that had AAAs. Most of the ratings went to counties or special districts like school districts. But I'd be happy to report that. Do you know?
And maybe I'll just add one comment in terms of comparative return question that you had. Relative to our established benchmarks, we have actually exceeded the returns of our established benchmarks by about 30 basis points collectively fiscal year to date. And on an absolute basis, the overall treasurer's pool has been able to generate positive returns since June 30 of this year.
Thank you.
We'll move all 4 of these reports. One thing I'd ask the CAO to look at, and the reason I asked for that figure of $50 million, that we constantly on their budget reflect that they have to find the money for that tool. I think we need to incorporate that as an expense or a funded item so that they can keep that kind of tool relevant and that they're not scurrying each year as to whether it should get funded. And so I think out of the $50 million they reap from it, we should be able to find, what is it, $100,000?
$135,000, $140,000
a year.
The question I would have to Joy, I know that you probably proposed that for the next proposed budget year, funding for your base for bondage, but do you have a need for those funds this fiscal year?
Yes, that's one of the reasons why we're over budget, because it wasn't funded this year.
Okay, we will report back on that then.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have one public comment card for Doherty.
Phyllis Doherty. I'm with Animal Issues Movement, but I'm actually here more as an individual today and a former city employee. Can you hear me? Want me to move somewhere else?
No, just speak right into it.
Oh, okay. I thought it was. All right. Oh, okay?
Okay.
Now you got me. Okay, that I can hear the difference, too. I'm deeply, deeply concerned about Department of Animal Services, as you know, and this is much more serious than it appears to be, because inside the department is totally disintegrating. You have no emergency evacuation plan. If we were to have a major earthquake or something right now, there are no plans for evacuating the shelters nor handling the situations in the city. We have no policy or operations manual. When people come in, the employees do not know what to do. This is common knowledge and not denied by Mr. Boakes, because they stopped using the policy manual and they've stopped revising it. So they just don't have one. The other thing, they do not have a training unit. So when people come in, they have no way to train and they have no way to disseminate information. When you try to talk with Mr. Boakes, you know the difficulty that you have. You can imagine what it's like for these employees. There is no communication within that department, and this is why I'm so concerned. You are now, because of the financial situation and people retiring and so forth, you're on the verge of losing your upper internal management people, Linda Gordon, Nancy Moriarty, Keith Kramer. I don't know about Wendell Bauer, because he's holding everything together right now. When you have a fire, a disaster, these are the people right now that are out there. That's the reason everything goes well, not because of the management of animal control, because they are not there and they don't understand what's happening. If you lose these people before we do something to redevelop and rebuild the inside of the department, you are not going to have someone that can pick up these pieces and do it. And I'm very, very concerned. I hope that you understand how serious this is. I've given you a letter that suggesting that you consider maybe transferring this department under the police department, which is what they have done all over the country, and it has worked very, very well because they need protection. The minute this anything happens here, you're going to have all of the radical attacks again. And if you hire somebody else from the outside, the same thing will happen. So it's very, very serious. I hope you'll look at the letter. And I just want to give you one thing. I hope someone will take a look at this and recommend that the CAO or the city attorney or someone think about using administrative citations for the city, not just for animal control, but for a lot of departments, because right now we're running out of money because the good people are paying for the services, so much for the bad people. The administrative citation enables you to issue an administrative citation when someone is violating the law, does not interfere with any other type of action you take, and the money comes back to the city. Buena Park is doing this. It's perfected, and so I didn't bring it to you as a draft. Okay, thank you.
Can you give David that information? We'll have somebody look at it.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Meeting's adjourned.